All right, we have a quorum, and it is 6:30, so if you would join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, I'm sorry, roll call first. Thank you, Julie.
Ken Dawson.
Here.
Christopher Espinoza.
Here.
Cheryl Fuller. Here. Jenny Hagstrom.
Here.
Terry Pavicic.
Here.
And Don Renner.
Sort of here, yes.
Are you ready for adjournment?
All right, now we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first agenda item is approval of minutes for the June 12th, 2023 business meeting and the June 12th, 2023 closed meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Terry moves, Chris seconds.
Thank you very much. Terry Pavicic.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Ken Dawson.
Aye.
And Don Renner.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 4, this is our first reception of visitors, public comment?
no
slips? No slips? Okay. Move on to item number 5, Hank.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Few items for you this evening, just really some updates on what we do over the summer. Ryan has been really busy leading several committees on the work that came out of the hybrid block survey at the end of the school year. He shared with you that he'd be forming these committees, and he's going to walk you through some of the work that he's been doing, and I'll update you on some of the administrative work that we've been doing.
Hi, I promise it's shorter. Yeah, I know. I only have 5 slides, and you're looking at one already. And I've already seen before. So after doing the initial survey stuff, it became clear that there was like 4 committees that had to be formed. And so access schedule, resource interventions, resource programming structures, and then also procedure review and alignment. So all of them had staff, student, building admin, and district admin. And so far, the committees, 3 of the committees have met twice, 1 has met once. And so I'll just kind of talk through what we've done so far and kind of what our next steps are. And, you know, just as a footnote, in some of our opening days during the opening, teacher days, the staff will be reporting out to the staff about the committee work. So I won't be reporting out on that. I'll do that here. But there'll be teachers from North on the different committees reporting out, and then teachers from North to North teachers. So, we good. Our access committee, we've met twice. The student representatives were at the first meeting, but not the second. They've been traveling the world. It's been interesting to hear, like, I'm going to Italy. Can I zoom in? I'm like, no. Like, go enjoy your trip. I mean, you can, but you should really ask your parents first. Before going through the Access Committee, we met with CSSS. We put their dates into the calendar. And then some of the work that we did was reviewing it. So we started off by looking at the feedback from teachers throughout the year. And then the teachers and students on the committee talked about things that they would like to see in the schedule, and most importantly, what they would like changed and what they would like increased. So we did spend time making sure that we're increasing time for teacher and student interventions. Also talking through the flexible scheduling software that we've just recently signed the data agreement on so that we can build in the student choice days. We also looked at the formats for the lessons. After we talked through them, I sort of redid a lesson that I did in the spring that was particularly the staff and the students said it was valuable, but the way it was delivered, they felt like it was not as valuable as it could be. And so I redid it, and we looked at it for the second committee meeting, and they all agreed that, like, yes, that is, if we're going to do that, this is the way it should go. And then we also talked about increasing communication with access for students and families, talking about getting into the principals, communication at the end of the week. How can we get them on TVs? How can we build it into announcements now that announcements are during access? So this committee will then continue during the year, but we don't have any additional meetings scheduled for this summer.
Can you give us a little background on how many students and how they were?
Yeah, sure. On the access committee, there were 2 students. One was from South, one was from North. And principals both reached out to students at their schools. Also, when we went to the government classes in the spring, I think it was Lauren Berg's classes, that there were a couple of students from there who said that if we're doing committee work over the summer, they'd be interested. Actually, one of the students on the access committee was in that class. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Intervention committee, we've met twice. We actually have a third meeting that has been scheduled for August. Interventions, it's a little bit tougher, right? That we're looking at how do we make sure that kids who haven't been as successful over the past year, how do we make sure that they are? And so we first went through, so you'll see a little bit of overlap between some of the committees, right? So we looked at the access schedule in the intervention committee meeting to make sure that the intervention committee felt like there was enough time for teachers and students to be able to access each other. We also talked about communication, specifically around syllabi and office hours, right? We do post them in TAC, but it's whether or not they're looking in Google Classroom for this or whether or not they're looking here, we were talking about, is there a way that we can have like a link on the website that would take them to something that has all of the teachers' office hours with their syllabi. And so we've sort of mocked something up. I'm going to work through it with exec council a little bit. And the reason that we are having the third committee meeting is to look at some of the documents that we are creating to make sure that, yes, this is everything that the staff, the students, and the administrators felt like would be valuable to staff. For example, we've been working on a reference document for staff and families talking about the different interventions. And so initially it was a non-linkable document, but after talking with the staff in the second committee meeting, there was a lot of talk about, well, if we click on the link, maybe it will tell us a little bit more about what that intervention is and who's the targeted student. And so Erin and Sarah and I have kind of stepped back looking at how to make a linkable document. And so that's something that will also be at the third meeting. And then also streamlining communication between CSSS and teaching staff, right? That there are things that the counselors do with students, there's things that the teachers are trying to do with students, and how do we know that if a counselor is working on something, do the staff know about it? Does the staff know how to get to a counselor quickly and easily? And then if something is happening, how is that communication back? And so that's something that also is going to be a big focus of the third meeting after we review the documents. Resource committee, again, we've met twice. We are meeting a third time. We decided that with the students were actually very vocal about the use of their resource time, and the students were talking about how when we're marketing different things that we really have to think, is that something that a student is going to want to use during their time? And that sort of, I know Courtney said that hearing the students say that, like, kind of like, oh, it's your time, that was something that as we're thinking through all the different resource programming, how do we make sure that we're doing that? So first thing, Jen Fisher, a teacher at South, brought forward an idea about how do we help students create study groups. there was a lot of articles that we used from Indiana University, from Northwestern, about the value of teachers helping guide students to create study groups, and then how can we reinforce that. But again, it's a student-led study group. So how do we create an environment for students that not only do they know how to do it, but they want to use their time to do it? And so we started creating a how-to guide for teachers on how to encourage their students to get started, because again, the teachers are not leading it. This is something that would be student-led, but in any time you get started with something, there's a little bit of like sort of prompting on how do we get that started. Students in this committee specifically talked about the communication that we were using around resource wasn't effective because we were using adult communication tools, not student communication tools. And so there were some pretty savvy students on this one. So they're going to help us develop like an Insta style advertisement. And I said I would love to, I don't even know, I've never been on Instagram before, so I guess that sort of shows my age. And then also, how do we make sure that parents are aware of and how they can encourage their student to do it? So we're thinking about in the principal's weekly message, dropping like different facts from different colleges about like how it can be valuable or how students use them in college, so that as they're thinking about how they're doing in classes, like this is maybe is the first step. If you can't make your teacher's office hours, have you joined a study group? And maybe that's a first step before needing to know if you have to go to office hours. And then the last one is about peer tutors. We've been talking a lot about student leadership, specifically in access and resource, having more access lessons led by students and facilitated by teachers. And then also, if we can find a way for peer tutors to be available for study groups, is sort of like a check a tutor out sort of model. So if the three of us were doing a study group and we were all kind of stuck, that there would be a list that we could look at where we say like, that student says that they're available during fourth period resource and that they feel like they can help us with this topic. And then how do we connect them? How do we make that easy to do? And so that's something that we're also working on. It's, as we dug into it, it's a little bit more layered than we initially thought. And so we did set a third meeting for the middle of August before school starts, so we can lock down some of these things. And then our fourth committee was about procedures. We met once. It was a great meeting. And our next meeting is going to scheduled after we talk at DLT. So it wasn't product-based. It was talking about like what are some things that were a concern from staff over the last year, specifically about procedures and also for students. It was interesting to hear kids talk about different procedures about like either late work or reassessment or grading policies and their impact and how it either motivated or demotivated them. And so a lot of the topics that we were generating are specifically for DLT to talk about. And then after that, DLT speaks, then we're going to set our second meeting. So that will likely be right after the beginning of the school year starting. But a lot of the focus was about either motivating or demotivating. How do we make sure that we're motivating them also to attend with our policies? Specifically about making sure that it's about student learning, not about saving points at the end of the semester. And then also making sure that if we believe that a grade should represent what a student knows and can do, are the intersection of this policy and this policy and this policy, our procedure, pardon me, are they doing that? Or are we, have they moved apart enough that we need to make sure that we look back at it? And so there's several topics that they asked to bring to DLT. And so we're going to do that at our next DLT meeting in August. And then a great idea started with Kelly, and then we kind of, Dr. Zerner, and we started kicking around at the committee about a way of recognizing students who have no unexcused absences, or high achievers in the classroom, and that don't have any missing work. So is there a way that we can tie that together and there be some kind of level of recognition for those students? Because that is what we value. We want students to be here. I think there was a question that Josh was asking in the committee a couple of times, that are we okay if a student has a lot of absences, but they're still doing well? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but are we okay with that? And so that was something that we talked a lot about. And so this idea of recognizing students that, we don't, we just want to make sure that when students are thinking about their education, that it's not just in isolation, that there is value for that classroom community and being there for it and talking with your peers and making sure that you're completing work in time that's tied to your learning, not just, oh my gosh, I have a C+, how can I get to a B-? What late work can I, scramble to put together? So we'll be talking about that in DLT in August. So each committee had between like 5 and 7 teachers on it, and between 2 and 3 students on it. And so I would send out an agenda at the beginning, and at the end I would just sort of do a recap, and Hank and Josh were copied on all of those emails so that we can continue the work moving forward, and that if anyone had anything to add, that they would see sort of the recap of our work so that we were all on the same page moving forward. So as we look forward to the fall, all of the committees will continue. They may look a little bit different. Like a committee may be run within each building rather than both at the same time. Others will be continue with me. And so we'll just, as the work evolves, we'll look at that structure, but none of them will just stop sort of at the end of the summer.
Any questions for Ryan?
Question, as far as the teachers, were some of the teachers on multiple committees or?
Gosh, was anyone on multiple committees? I don't think so. We had, I want to say 30 to 35 teachers volunteer. And on that volunteer form, they marked like first preference, second preference, third. So I gave everyone their first preference. And so I didn't have, just because, you're setting a date and it's like, oh, I'll come to the next one, but I can't come to this one. So I would say each committee had like 5 to 7 teachers in attendance, while more may have volunteered, but I didn't turn anyone away. Cool. Some teachers, after hearing about the first couple of committees and how they went, they asked to get in on another one. Mm-hmm. So I felt like a good sign, because they felt like it was being productive. And so I think I'm looking forward to them reporting out to the rest of the staff.
Cool.
How would you measure a successful year this upcoming year from the perspective lens of the hybrid block schedule?
I would say that more students would be using resource time to collaborate with each other, that they'll take advantage of the SAT prep that happens during resource, that student leaders will be running lessons for topics that are appropriate conversations for the grade level. So it may be a similar lesson, but the seniors running it with seniors are going to run it differently than seniors running it with freshmen. I think the student choice model, that we continue to expand that so that teachers are having students sign up for them, and everyone in their room has signed up for them for help, and that they don't have to send passes out and then have 25 kids in their room plus the 6 that they've invited. See what else. I think that students and teachers would continue to volunteer their ideas. Like Jill Erzig bringing forward the staff versus student competition at the end of the year. That was really well received at South, and so that's expanding to 4 different opportunities between staff and seniors. I'm hoping that catches fire a little bit at North. Having Jen Fisher bring forward the idea of helping students try to set up the study groups. So I think a marker for me for it being successful would also be that more staff will volunteer ideas more regularly that I can continue to say yes to. So, yeah, I think those.
And how are you going to measure that success? Through surveys? I mean, a lot of it is not necessarily quantitative. So how do you go about measuring the success of the year?
I mean, I do a lot of like survey work in the fall and the spring, but I think also just walking the halls and talking with kids. I mean, that's part of it. Speaking with staff like pretty regularly, walking the building and just asking like, are you having a better experience with it this year? Is there something else that you would like to see? I mean, a lot of the ideas I sort of get or concerns that I get are just conversations that I'm having with staff as I'm walking around the building. I think, some staff are more comfortable or familiar with me than others. I spent a lot of time at South last year because the North staff knew me going into this role, whereas South staff didn't. But I feel like I know a lot more of the South staff this year, so that next year I'll be able to split my time probably a little bit more evenly between the buildings.
And we still plan on doing the twice-a-year survey. We learned a lot between the first one and the second one, and that'll give us more like longitudinal look at, changes in what's happening. The first one was very different than the second one. And I think the second one gave us a lot more actionable data, which led to these.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this fall survey will give us more information. Like after the first one, it was hard because we were only in it for 10 weeks. And if I think back to some of the comments that didn't bubble up as strongly as they did in the spring, I think I will stay on pace, but I don't know right now. I'm only in week 9 or I'm only in week 10. And then some of those staff members later saying like, no, I am not on pace, whereas where I was last year. So coming into the fall this year, they're gonna have a reference point where there will be more actionable comments that I get probably from this fall versus last fall, because everyone was kind of going through it for the first time.
Do you have any tools that allow you to measure how students are utilizing the resource period? You say you want to increase the utilization by students of the resource period. Do we have any tools that track how students are actually utilizing resource period, whether they're going to a counselor, going to a teacher, or involving themselves in these small group studies? It would be nice if we had a way of measuring that to see a steady growth of utilization of the resource period by our students in those examples.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they do track when someone goes into the counseling office. There is some like a kind of like a scanning kind of thing. The SAT program is by sign up, and so that will be easy to track. The student sort of generated study groups that we plan on doing a survey for freshmen and sophomores asking like, if you were to join a study group, like what subject would you be most interested in? Who's your teacher for that subject? Give us a scale of 1 to 10 about how confident you are with that subject. Would you be interested in being a leader of that? And so I think teachers will be able to see who's in a study group. And as that kind of gathers steam, I think we'll know also from staff whether or not their students are. So I would think that would roll into the survey about, how much of your students used study groups, and also for students. But also I think that's also going to be anecdotally the difference of like walking around, like our juniors and seniors choosing study groups rather than late arrival. or early dismissal during that resource time, that will also be a pretty good indicator of, yes, they're seeing value in that, and value enough that instead of going home, that they are staying here.
Yeah, I would just point out that a lot of the way we're going to measure success is anecdotally and through surveys. But if there's anything that can be done to provide data to suggest that this schedule is improving the overall academic experience of our students, I would strongly suggest that you do whatever you can to track that data and bring it back to the board so that we can see that and be assured that there is some actual data beyond just survey and anecdotally.
But qualitative data is data.
You're right.
It
You're
is.
right.
It
You're
is
right, but it's
like that's legitimate educational research data. It's what we use in our profession a great deal
I'm
in
not- and I'm
determining
not
the
minimizing that at
efficacy
all.
of programming.
I'm just saying, any hard data that's truly measurable.
What would you?
Is it
Like,
like when
what would
they,
you
when
want
they're
to
gonna
see
do the
measured?
self-choice and get a pass to go here or a pass to go there?
Yeah, that's
Is
what I'm- that's what I'm
is that
suggesting.
Yeah,
something
well,
just
that
I
like-
mean, we'll
you
have
would say, like 17 students chose to go to, Mr. X's office hours, or, does
Yeah.
that program capture?
So the flexible scheduling software, right now, we're just going to start off by using for student choice, which is, runs during access. And partially it's because I don't want to overwhelm the staff with another program to start the year. And so I did choose to do sort of a slow roll into it. I would say the intervention committee, that we did have a longer conversation about, we just pull the Band-Aid off? And we're going to use this for office hours, we're going to use this for student choice, we're going to use this for student success support with a pass, all of that. Based on sort of where the staff was when we left in the spring, I don't think that's a good idea to start the year. Although, if the staff feels like, yeah, no, it's super easy to take attendance in, which it is, and students are getting used to it, and it does show, like, I invited the student to office hour and I can mark the attendance about whether or not they showed up. I sent a pass to the student, and yes, they attended, but they were attended and inactive. That you can get that minute with the data on it. So I do think that as students get used to it, that will increase it, and then we'll be able to look at those numbers that way.
Yeah.
Because also, our plan is to open that on Sunday evening so that, families are at home and they're planning their week, that's something that they can do together, of choosing things. Also, the staff have the opportunity to choose students before, so if they need to see them, that they can choose them rather than students choosing for themselves, which I think will also be a good data point of how many students were chosen by their teachers versus the students made a choice in that software. So we do have passes that are in triplicate form, and we do, track that. But I think sometimes the data is only good as it being inputted by the staff member. And so one of the reasons that we talked about streamlining it into all of those other things is so that staff would only have one spot for it, and then all of the data could be collected from there. So I think I foresee it being used in more facets in the spring, but I don't want to start off with it in the fall until I can train everybody on it. I know all of the kids have the app, all that kind of stuff.
Fair enough.
I think the qualitative data, though, the fact that we're going to have a very similar survey in the fall and the spring that we had this last spring, based on what we learned in the fall, will provide some quantitative look at qualitative experiences. Are we seeing the overall experience in these measures that we're using trending in the direction that we want to see them trend?
Yeah.
And will the plan be that the access teachers remain, stay with the same kids?
as much as possible.
So, I mean, we might be able to get a little bit more
Mhm.
from the teachers that have now, gone over a year with the same group of kids.
Yeah, they're not starting from scratch.
Yes. So the teachers who had seniors now will start with freshmen. And so we did have a good perspective of a freshman access teacher at South who was going to his second year, and he talked about how can we make sure that I can continue to build a relationship with these students, or talked about at the end of the year, like I wish there was a closure day because I had tried to build relationships with the kids all year. And then there were also teachers there that were leaving their senior access and starting over with freshmen. And so they were very invested in the schedule and the lesson formats and everything, making sure that their freshmen were going to get off to a good start, knowing that they were going to be with them for 4 years. And so it was valuable to have the two perspectives in the same room, for sure.
Is there flexibility in the program, so mid-year, from the first survey, we see things that we could adjust or fine tune to improve it? Do we have the flexibility to be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, so the program allows me to run 3 or 4 different alternate schedules. So the first time we ran student choice, it was a mixture of academic and open gym, or puzzles and games in the library. And so we do have the possibility of having a schedule that specifically, teachers, as we're getting towards final exams, what would you like listed on the student choice schedule as we near that? And that could be schedule 1. I can have one that's only academics. I can have one that has more student choice, like fun options, or a mixture of both. And so I think that, as we do things during the year, we may be pulling from different schedules. Last year, I made sort of laid everything out for staff, and I had department chairs looked at it. This year, staff members are going to put, for each different schedule, what they would like listed. And so I think that the staff will appreciate that as well. I know the students like the student choice day, and now that we'll get over the tech component, I think it will take off. And I sort of foresee this being more of the model for access than not.
Cool.
I applaud you for forming the committees and addressing the issues, and
Thanks.
I really like the idea of those committees staying on during the school year so that as you are walking the buildings and getting the feedback, you can take those back to the committees and continue to evolve and work on the schedule and fine tune it.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think that part, that in the access, or in the survey for staff, there'll probably be an open-ended question. Is there something that you would like any of the committees to talk about, as we're going into the year, so that they have an opportunity. They know who the committee members are because they'll be presenting to them in the fall, and they know who I am. But sometimes they just need a spot to write that down in case they haven't talked to any of us. So that's likely going to be a question in the survey for the fall.
Cool.
And as the board will see has seen in the goals that are out there, through our HR department with Rob, we're doing a whole nother staff feedback loop as well. So between those two working independent of one another, I imagine that there'll be crossover that comes up in those two opportunities for staff feedback.
We talked about the kids a lot, but when you mentioned that in the fall last year, some of the teachers felt like they were behind, is there gonna be a way for them to reach out or to say, I still don't feel like I'm.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yes,
Okay.
I mean, I think that the questions in the survey, I made adjustments to the spring survey based on hearing how things were going and what people were concerned about, and giving them, the staff, sort of the checkbox list of is this still a concern for you, or is this not, helped some staff members who didn't want to write a narrative, but also that they could do those of, these are still strengths for me, these are still weaknesses. And, I think it was 1/3 of the staff who did the check boxes also did open response. I think there were 90, so I remember.
Same thing, and it was similarly
Sorry.
formatted for students.
Yeah.
I know it's 78 minutes or whatever was an adjustment
Yes,
for everybody.
For sure.
So.
yes, I agree.
Right, any other questions on those? All right, obviously, there's a lot going on across the district, a lot of facilities work, a lot of getting buildings and stuff ready, everybody in their individual aspects that are working all summer, working on their branches of the organization. But then across the whole administrative team, I've shared this with the board, but just to go through it while we're all at the table together. Really, we've spent June and the beginning of July drafting goals and tasks. Those are being presented to the board next tonight. Determining out of those goals and tasks, what work do we have to do over the summer to be ready for everybody to come back. Tonight, we'll together review those draft goals and tasks and see if we've captured everything that the board thinks that we should be working on next year. Then tomorrow, we come together as an administrative team to look at those based on your feedback tonight and continue our working for those first days back, the welcome back, and the 3 days that staff have to work before students show up. Wednesday, the assistant superintendents, principals, and I will start mapping out the entire year of team meetings, what's going to happen, what our activities are with leadership, and when we plan on bringing updates to the board on those goals and tasks throughout the rest of the year. Then August, what is that? Second? I keep messing up those August dates. August 2nd, the leadership team is coming together for half a day to just work on those 3 days back, making sure that we have our schedules, our presentations, everything ready to go. The 11th and 14th, it's the Ryan mentioned DLT. That's our district leadership team. That's all the administrators and department chairs. We'll be working together on a variety of planning to come back, preview of opening days. We review some of the staff discipline things for that. The union leadership is coming in from both bargaining units to spend an afternoon with us to look at just staff procedures and discipline and how all of that works so that we're all on the same page. And then we kick off the school year with opening days. And then shortly after that, students are back. So, we're really progressing well. We have this document that's our summer work document that we'll be revisiting with the team tomorrow, which has been really nice to just so everybody can have an eye on what everybody is doing. There's been a lot of work over the first kind of 6 weeks of the summer. So we have, about 6 weeks left. We're about the midway point right now. So after we have our next conversation, we'll have a better idea of where we're at. We'll come back and get all of those goals and tasks approved by you in August, but we got a lot of work to do before everybody gets back. So questions on anything that was presented so far?
I just can't believe it's going so fast.
It always does.
It just seems like yesterday it was graduation.
All right. So the next piece, as I mentioned, is the strategic roadmap, which is the goals and tasks inside of this. Just as a reminder, last year the board approved a new strategic plan. With our mission and vision, I bolded a few of the key concepts in each of those for you. But really, the idea of preparing students for the future of their choosing and their ability to realize their potential and positively impact those around them is really the heart of what we're doing in District 99. Inside of that, we support this with the values that were established as part of the strategic plan. Our opening days for our staff are really going to be structured around those 5 values. So everything that we present on those first couple of days, we are tying that work back into that. And then inside of all of that, we have our strategic directions and strategic expectations. So what I've done for the board here, obviously you've all been provided this in advance. I'm not planning on reading this all to you, as I know you all know how to read. What I've tried to do for you and for those that are reviewing this, that might be tuning in or watching this later to get the overall gist of what's happening inside of here, is to list on each page here, kind of grouped some key themes that are happening under those strategic direction, which is an equitable and supportive environment. The strategic expectation is that bolded first row, and to ensure safe and sustainable opportunities for all students, families, including access to district resources. The lines under that are all of the pieces that we've shared with the board that we're going to do, and we've started to draft out what that actually means for each of those things, the work we're doing inside of that as well. So that's kind of the format that I've used to present it to you. So in this first one, really, this is a lot of what Ryan talked about today with the access and resource pieces. This is the idea of our support, student accountability, the state accountability around student success, making sure that we have safe environments, inclusive environments, that our communications support that, and that we're looking for feedback to determine if we're doing those well. So that's kind of what I'm going to give you on each slide. If there's anything that a board member wants to pull out, anything you want to wordsmith in this is an opportunity here with everybody at the table. Obviously, we'll continue to listen to feedback from now until when we come back at the workshop in August. So, you see something today and it's kind of gnawing at you, and then you want to reach out and talk to me or Don or both of us about something, we'll continue to listen for the next month, next 3 weeks, whatever it is, and then we'll come back at the August workshop and ask you to approve these as our goals for the next year. So questions in process or how this works?
No.
All right, is there anything on this under ensure safe and sustainable opportunities for all students, families, including access to district resources, that any board member would like to, has a question on or would like changed or for us to consider? And I know I've, just, for those in the audience or watching at home, board members have offered stuff, asynchronously up until this point, but this is our first opportunity for everybody at the table, if there was something.
Are we still gonna sort of do that where we kind of want everyone to get involved in 2 extracurricular activities of some sort?
Oh, yeah.
That
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The goal is that everybody's involved in 2 at some point during their high school career.
Yeah.
All right. The next couple, really the themes on these, in this slide, in these 2 groups, are attendance and discipline that we know have not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Just making sure we have clear expectations, the work around access and resource periods that Ryan was referencing earlier. Really connected to this is the idea of reaching out to families and sharing expectations with them. And then the idea of those values of care, trust, and belonging. And once again, how our facilities can help support all of those things.
Yeah.
Is there anything in here that anybody would like to pull out and discuss?
I think it's a great idea to try to recognize students who are, having perfect attendance and, making the choice to be at those when they could choose to leave or go elsewhere. So
I think recognizing the attendance, as being an issue is a step in the right direction, and I'm sure your administrative team will formalize ideas how to address that.
Yep.
Yeah, attendance has been a interesting thing for a lot of years.
Yeah, and the
This is not
pandemic
the-
really shook things up everywhere.
Yeah, oh,
Everywhere.
for a lot of things,
Yeah.
but that in particular.
Yep.
Do you think you noticed an improvement as last year went on, or not as much as you would have liked?
It's hard to say, for some students, yes, for other students, no. As a whole, we know that chronic absenteeism is up in District 99. It's up in other areas. We're better than some places, worse than others. I mean, it's a hard thing to wrap your arms around. I think just year over year, students getting back into the habit of we go to school every day will help us. But we know that the whole, like how people attend work and how they think about the workplace, and how families think about how they value their time and what their children are doing has changed post-pandemic. And, we do a lot to support students when they aren't here. And some students, as Ryan mentioned, because of that, can be successful and not be here. But helping students understand they're not, and their families understand they're not getting the full, rich experience we offer when they aren't here. They might be able to get a grade that they're satisfied with, but they're not getting the full experience that District 99 offers if they're not here with us.
Are you finding that there's a lot of students that still want to remote learn?
Not so much, but I think the idea of missing a day or 2 or 12 is not as big of a risk. Families don't see that as big of a priority. Of being here every day is what we saw in the past.
That's a shame. It's a real shame.
Well, we'll see if it changed forever or if this is a short-term.
Well, I think, as you said, though, I think the workforce is finding that same happy medium, because some are requiring everyone to come to work again, and they're not liking that.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting call.
Yep, so, I mean, we are part of society, so, whatever's happening in society is happening within our walls, so.
Well,
you know.
if students see their parents having that same struggle, they may have it too, just
Yep.
because of the environment that they're in.
Well, and,
So-
schools also have always served an aspect of childcare, and, you send kids off to school so that you can go to work, but if you're working from home, like, it's not, I don't need you to
They
go to
might-
school,
yeah.
it just, all these dynamics factor into what's going on, So,
Yeah.
but we know that the best experience we can offer students is that when they're here with our teachers. Yep.
I think it's a really important takeaway too, as having like a soon-to-be college student, like that's the message I want.
Yeah, showing up is important.
Yeah.
Yes.
The best
Well-
experience that you're gonna get is if you are physically
Correct.
present.
But then a lot of the universities are offering remote learning, so it's.
I know, it's
That's-
difficult. and
That's a
why-
fine line that,
Yeah, you wanna be
we
like-
have to tread.
Right,
You're
and we're all
do
gonna have to
better if
navigate
you-
this,
If you sit
right?
there in person, yeah.
Yeah.
This is all the kind of new world we're in with different expectations, and things are shifting, and we gotta keep a close eye on it, but especially for a student where it is, we can demonstrate that it's impacting them negatively, those are gonna be like our top priority, but we wanna encourage kids to be here with us.
Yeah.
Not only that, it's important for their socialization skills.
Absolutely.
They're not going to get that any other way than human interaction.
Correct.
You mean they're not going to get it on this?
Unfortunately not.
All right, anything else on this one?
In the building community section,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about reviewing and evaluating student and parent outreach opportunities. And I think we've talked about this is potentially involving the board in ways of outreaching to the community as well. And I'm just wondering if we should potentially maybe edit that first statement to include the board in participation with different community opportunities.
I have that,
is that
it's
addressed
sitting
somewhere
down in one of the other ones.
Okay.
But it is in our
We can-
activities there.
then we'll
It's
just-
there.
We'll
Yeah,
revisit that when we
yeah.
get there. Okay.
I can't remember which one, I have to go into the details, but definitely increasing opportunities for the board to interact. It's in our work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I shared a document with the board this last week, if you haven't
Yes.
had a chance to go at it, of some of the
Yes.
things that the communications team and I are looking at to provide additional outreach opportunities for board members.
And that was much appreciated.
Let's see. The next one really is the keys around social emotional learning. This is the work that comes in every setting, but is supported greatly from our counseling department. But social emotional learning should be present in every classroom, every interaction that we have with students and staff. Some of this is just helping to continue to grow our own skills as educators in those areas. Some of it's around our practices and processes and making sure that we are putting in practices that support students and families, and making sure that we all have the skills as the adults to do that. The idea of, when we look at discipline, what is the appropriate level of discipline? Are we assigning that equitably, fairly, appropriately? Are we looking at discipline as a lens that it's a teaching opportunity? Like, that's what we are here to do, is to teach. If a student is deficient in math, we help them get better at math. If they are deficient in how they are behaving, we should be working at getting their behavior better. It shouldn't just be about punishing students. It needs to be about teaching students and making sure that they understand how their discipline impacts their outcomes, those around them, and how to make better decisions moving forward. That's why we've invested greatly in the idea of our PATH program and those kinds of things moving forward. So, but that's every interaction that we have with kids when they aren't, very small behaviors, not doing what we would hope that they would do, all the way to the largest levels of misbehavior. How do we work through that to make that the most positive learning experience it can be, while still maintaining a safe learning environment so that others can learn in that? And how do we balance that? So that's a lot of the work in that space. And you can see a lot here around communication and collaboration. That's, how do we continue to step that up? Those feedback loops that we've mentioned multiple times tonight. How do we communicate to people our expectations, how we're improving, what we're doing to get better, how those in our community, students, staff, parents, community members, all can help contribute to making this the most positive environment. Questions, comments on any of these?
On the social and emotional learning aspect, this may kind of dovetail into your staff section, but assessing whether or not we have adequate staffing levels to provide the requisite amount of support for our students. I remember being at a board meeting before the election, hearing about how taxed some of those who are handling these issues are. And I think it would be meaningful to have your administrative team assess whether or not we have adequate staffing levels to meet our student needs.
Absolutely. And we do that on every year, which is why we expanded 2 of our positions this year, the PATH coordinator and the student success coordinators, to make sure that, at least that kind of tier 2, that second tier of support was there. Every year that I've been here, we've increased resources in our CSSS, our counseling student support services, area that's an area of the district that's grown because the needs have grown every year. But yes, I mean,
Okay.
it's just, that's a yearly task for us.
It may be something that's unsaid, but
No, it's.
maybe adding it would just be a point of emphasis, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see if it shows up in the staffing piece, but I can't remember if it's there or not. All right. Moving into the next strategic direction is growth of student ownership and agency. On this one, we have three different, we got a lot more granular when the strategic plan was built in this section. So you'll see like back here in these, just the way that the strategic plan was written, these are very, more 30,000 foot kind of statements that we're working inside of. When we move into this strategic direction, the expectations got a lot more granular. So we move from, like in that first strategic direction, the expectations, very large overarching. This one, we move from like 30,000 foot view to more like 5,000 foot view. So you're gonna see less kind of actual goals and tasks under there because a single goal or task gets us that more granular outcome. So in this one, really focused on academic progress and tracking that and making sure we're communicating it, that we're focusing on how students use their time. Once again, you heard some of that summer work that's being done around that leading into next school year. Really making sure that we're doing a good job of gathering the student perspective and their voice. Obviously, as you heard today, the more students that we have as leaders, the easier it is to then gather their voice. So creating more leadership opportunities for students is part of that. Obviously, student engagement is inside of that. And then you'll start to see this idea, it's all through the strategic plan of what comes next for our students. So the idea of post-secondary planning and the connections to what students do after they leave us is threaded throughout the strategic plan, and you can see that in some of the goals and tasks that are in here as well. Questions on any of these or clarifications? All right. And then this one just has a couple more. Really, this comes back to that activities athletics data. One of our key things we're focusing on that we realized last year as we started to try to track this was the way that we are tracking student involvement in these and attendance in not athletics so much, but activities is an area where the data isn't great for us. So we really need to define what it means for a student to be involved in a club. Is it signing up and, being on the mailing list so you see what's going on? Is it you have to attend once? Is it you have to attend regularly? What is regularly? Because some clubs meet twice a week while other ones meet once a month. When you get into the activities world, it's very different as you move from one activity to another, one club to another. So as we look at it and say, is a kid actively engaging in these extracurricular, sports is kind of easy, right? But activities is much muddier. And then also it's, we need to start looking at how do we offer credence to students that are active outside of school, but maybe it's not in one of the things that we are offering. We have students that are very active in scouting or their church group, or we have, students that are going to be Olympians, and they're active, they're involved, they're managing things outside of school as well as school, but it's not one of our things. It's a very important thing to them, but it's not ours. But that doesn't mean that they're not doing something outside of school. Mm-hmm. So there's all of these things that we need to learn how to better measure and evaluate if a student truly is involved beyond the academic school day.
Does that thing give any self-reporting? Like, can a kid,
Right, that's what we have to figure out, is how do we do that?
Yeah.
Right, how do we, and then record that accurately so that we know it's there. So this is kind of a new data set that we've thought for years, like being active at school, being active outside of school was important to student health and students being successful. But there's been a wealth of data over the last couple of decades about, it's a real predictor of post-secondary success. There's just not been a lot of work on, like, what should that data look like as it goes in to track it, which is, last year we started to look at that, and we hope, well, not hope, we will make progress on that this next school year. But it's a messy data problem out there.
But one with a ton of potential
Mhm.
to really improve upon the overall experience of our students.
Absolutely.
And
Well,
I'm
and-
excited to see what you guys are able to do with that.
And that student outreach piece, like if a student isn't involved in something, why is that? Is it their home life doesn't allow them to, or we have nothing that interests them, or, or, what are those things that are stopping a student from being involved?
Is administration working on anything to measure post-graduation success as like, with all of these things in place? And so you have a student of the past couple of years who's been in these extracurriculars and has been a very academically successful student. Are we taking any measures to follow up with them after they've been in college or afterwards to measure how actually successful all of these things are?
Yeah, that data is really, the answer is yes, but, so yes, we are actively working at trying to get better data of what happens post-high school. One of the things we started doing last year was gathering student contact information, like their personal email addresses, so that we could start reaching out to students 1 year, 5 years after they leave us. Of course, that's self-reporting, and that they have to join in and do that. We also worked this year legislatively to try to get better data from our community college partners in Illinois. So in real time, and then after they continue at a community college. We know the largest number of our students post-secondary for college, where they go, is College of DuPage. So that's another data set we're looking at bringing in if students are being successful once they leave us there. And then we're left to tools that aren't really accurate out there that we can garner some information from, like the, Gina, what is the one that, from the universities?
It's like, is it the clearinghouse one?
The
Clearinghouse,
thank you. It just like went in and went out. There's the college clearinghouse data that we can get from colleges out there, but it's hit or miss, and it's not quite accurate data. It just kind of gives us a glimpse. But post-secondary data is really hard to come by.
Do we have a alumni page or anything for the graduates, college graduates of District 99?
What would, describe what would be on that alumni page?
Or
Because, I
just
mean,
a
we
way
have,
they can,
get back to us.
yeah.
They could put
Yes.
feedback on, like a web page, and it says your graduating class is 2002, and
We're actually, that's why I said, we started gathering last year, not this year's graduates, the year before graduates, all of their email addresses, so that we could reach out years afterwards to request that kind of feedback.
Yeah, because I know we have, and I don't remember what we call that, where we have the dinner every year, we recognize certain graduates.
Oh, the distinction,
distinguished, yeah.
yeah.
And how are you guys, people,
There's a whole process for that. It-
People are nominated,
Yeah.
people nominate, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
But what we're looking at is, I mean, just the general experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, we do an exit survey as students leave us, but now we're developing, like, 1 year out, how did it go? 5 years out, how did it go? Knowing that like, you're not gonna hear from every student, right? It's just, and the students that tend to respond to those surveys are students that either had a really good experience or a terrible one, right?
Yeah.
And as the years go by, the pool that's responding will get smaller and smaller. So,
Well, it could be like most of the universities and stuff. You just go onto their website and you can type in, hey, I graduated this year and this is what I'm doing. I'm, president of XYZ and, I am, involved in this, and just like an open-ended thing that you don't have to send out to anyone. You just can respond. I think that may
That's
be what
that's the
Sherelle was.
alumni database that we just did one last year, 2022, where we used that third-party company to gather that
Yeah.
information in. But
Yeah.
it's, once again, it's whoever volunteers to send it in.
Yeah.
But yes, Chris, that is an area where we would like to learn more. But, it's more national surveys and those kinds of things that give you the data where you can lean on best practices.
Okay.
When they're looking at just large data sets across, the country. Our small data set is much harder to gather. But we're trying to get a better set of data. All right, the next strategic direction is increased student engagement in post-secondary planning. So we have a whole section on post-secondary planning around here. Really, you can see some of the things that tie into this is the idea of executive functioning, knowing how to manage your time. We know that is as we started our strategic planning process, was a lot of feedback we got from former students that they were leaving us and were not being successful in managing their time. So that's part of the keys of inside of our new schedule, right, is that it offers students that opportunity to practice managing their time 1 day a week with us. And then we're helping them do that with some of the supports that Ryan offered up today, but also in the lessons that we're teaching them and strategies we're giving them to be more successful during that time. I didn't want to interrupt Ryan as he was rolling over there, but we do know, and it was brought up, the research definitively shows that forming groups of people to help you be successful as adults, like study groups at college, is hugely essential to being successful. Finding a group to be with in the workplace, finding a group to be with in college, finding a group to be with in your personal life, finding those groups and fostering them and learning to be successful inside of them is hugely helpful when you become when you move into college or you become an adult. So the idea of how can we foster that here within our walls is a huge piece moving forward. So you can see how those fit inside of here. And then once again, like I said before, leadership opportunities so we can have students lead other students in those settings. Anything in here? The next two sections really continuing under post-secondary success, knowing that families are important in developing this as well, providing equal access for all students to post-secondary planning and to what we're offering here within school, especially traditionally marginalized students and families that might not have had a legacy of a family to help share with them how to navigate some of these complex post-secondary systems, that we're reaching out to that. I mean, like AVID is something that's built in our curriculum that helps with that, but how do we just make sure that that's available to all students in some shape or fashion? And obviously the focus on career pathways, post-secondary planning, things like internships, TCD, all of those opportunities that we offer in our schools. One of the things that is in here that we'll continue to work towards is helping students understand the courses that they're taking now, what careers those are preparing them for down the line, so that they can see a connection between what they're doing now and what they might want to do in the future. Anything in here that I you'd like for me to pull out?
Is post-secondary planning just mean college, or that's,
No.
okay?
No, post-secondary
TCD.
planning is anything that comes,
Yeah,
it's the, however many years follow the 4 years with us.
okay.
So I always kind of boil it down to the bucket of they're going to continue to learn, they're going to work, they're going to need to fill their time. And they're going to have relationships with people in all of those settings. To me, those are kind of the big buckets of whatever happens after us entails. So what are you going to do? At some point, you're going to have to learn more things, whether it's formally or informally. You're probably going to have to work to sustain yourself. You're hopefully going to have some free time that you're going to fill with something that you enjoy, and you're going to have relationships in a variety of these settings that you're going to have to support. So to me, it's how are we helping students prepare themselves to fill those buckets? All right. Then we move into the last strategic direction that's really focused on our staff. The first section really looks at student relationships, connections, how do we recruit staff, how do we keep them here, how do we develop staff that are with us, how do we make sure that we all as professionals are using best practices in the settings that we're in, and how do we provide time and opportunity for all of that to happen. Any questions on these two? And the inside of this would be, Don, you asked earlier, like staffing needs and development around social emotional learning. This would happen kind of in that first one. We're increasing a caring, trusting, belonging environment based on, through an equity lens.
Do staff and teachers, are they able to utilize the counselors?
No, counselors here are for students.
Okay.
So we have a employee assistance program
Okay.
for outside counseling for adults that would seek it out that way. Yeah, really like counselors, psychologists, social workers, nurses, all of that piece of CSSS, that's all student facing.
Are staff utilizing the resources that are available to them?
It's not something because of confidentiality, we don't gather data on it. We just provide those opportunities for staff. We educate them on what's available, but then it's up to the staff member to engage in that.
Okay.
So anything else in this one? Then I think called out specifically in this next one is social emotional learning in our intervention programs and monitoring the data around that. So that's another spot where it shows up with our staff here. And then your question earlier, assuring staff roles and responsibilities match the current needs of our students, is that second one.
Okay.
So really, this is how we use the data that we're gathering about where students are engaging, what we talked about, what kind of data are we gathering to see if students are getting interventions, if they're appropriate, and then making sure we have the appropriate staff, that when we bring in staff, we onboard them appropriately so they're up and ready to go, that we're working constantly on our culture within our staff and staff morale and feedback. That's going to be a big piece you're going to hear a lot about this year as we enter into a whole project around staff morale and a feedback loop and a team of staff that are helping us shape the decisions we're making to make sure that we're meeting their needs as an organization moving forward. So Rob will be leading that project and reporting out with that team of staff as it forms and everything else throughout the year. Any questions on these? Obviously, the board has been provided a wealth of internal granular detail as to how we'll be doing some of these. I invite the board to peruse through that information as well. Reach out with any questions you have around these big overarching ideas or the more granular detail inside of it. This information has been shared with the district leadership team, so administrators and chairs, It's been shared with both bargaining groups, the union leadership in both of those groups, so that, and I've followed up with any questions that have come in, and offered to meet with them if they have further questions. And then all of this will be what we're parsing out and determining what we need to share with staff in those opening days.
How do we plan to nurture a culture of support and collaboration among all staff?
So that is this whole project that Rob will be coming later to share all of that
Okay.
with you. But
All that'll
we
be
are-
under that umbrella?
Yeah, we're partnering with a third party called EAB, that's the name of the company, that has a pretty well-defined process that's been used in many other school districts, some locally and across the country, that's really designed around it's a predefined survey that goes out to your staff. That it's around, if I remember correctly, 7 different domains of a workplace experience. That information comes back, and then it is a team of staff members that'll be led by Rob, but a cross-section of our staff that look at that feedback, kind of isolate what are the top priorities of things that need to be addressed, and then start determining how we should appropriately address those concerns.
Cool.
So, and then it's a constant, it just keeps going
Yeah.
in this loop, so that you can determine, like, is this thing that was a top thing, has it been addressed, and now it's kind of fallen down on the list? Because we know that, like, no matter where we work, there's always things that we would like to see different or improve, or those kinds of things that it's never like, oh, we fixed it, right? So this will create an opportunity for that constant dialogue, feedback, and then evaluating if, like, this team is going to look at it, prioritize something, make some kind of change in the workplace environment. What we should see is that concern fall down in the list and something fall up in its place, and then now it's move on to the next thing. But we also know, like, you can't do everything all at once, right? So it really, it's like, what is most critical? Let's focus our resources on what's most critical, hopefully resolve that, and then open up resources to take on the next most important concern.
Cool.
So it's a pretty well-defined process from an external group. Has good, real solid research behind it.
Good.
All right, any other questions?
And then are we being asked to approve this either, is it the August 21st or August 7th?
August 7th,
August
which
7th.
will be a workshop with action. These will be on there because I'd like for the board to approve them before we present them to the staff. And staff will be back before we meet at our normal August meeting.
Okay.
So I'd like to be able to get up in front of the staff with the administrative team and say, these are the board-approved goals for the year. Okay, as I said, please, take another walk through them. All of the background information has been provided as well. If there's something that is nagging at you, or, I didn't give you the opportunity to comment on it today, please reach out. Just copy Don and I on that so that we can discuss it, and then we'll bring it back on the 7th. Thank you. All right, I'm going to invite Jeff up for our new board members. This is Jeff Burgles.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
He is our HR director. One of the things that came out of a recent memo to the board was a question about our hiring process, and then ultimately how we announce our hirings and approve our hirings at board meetings. Since we have 3 new board members and some questions came up, we thought it'd just be a good opportunity to review, just give you like the 30,000-foot view of our hiring practices. I'll share with the board at some point, we have an internal document that outlines, I might have already, I can't remember, but we have an internal document that Jeff works on that documents all of our practices for hiring internally that I'll share with the board at a different point. You can take a look at it. All right.
All right.
Turn it over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Hank. So hiring practices here in District 99. I've got a handful of slides here kind of walking through the main kind of themes and steps within that, and then, I've got some bullet points, obviously, and as Hank mentioned, there's a much more detailed document that's an internal document that he can share with you that is also shared with our district leadership team and anybody who's in a hiring capacity. So initial coordination, so that comes from, finding out there's a need, and there's several ways that happens, particular to our teaching staff. That's usually with our staffing meetings that happen in late winter, early spring as we're preparing for the next year. And so what typically happens there is a principal then will coordinate with their staff in the building around the building perspective. So what does that include? That includes things like, all right, what position do we need to fill? And in particular to, let's say it's a science position, are we looking for somebody who's more physics, more chemistry, more biology? We're talking about social studies, whether somebody who's more, U.S. history, more geography, so there's lots of considerations that need to be put into that, as well as checking with the principal from across town and saying, okay, have the DCs talk and see what kind of overlap and coordination we need to do to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students as well as possible. Because one of the things that keep in mind is that when we hire people, a lot of people think, oh, I got hired Downers North, I got hired Downers South, but they're actually being hired by District 99. And so there's, we have to keep that perspective all the time that we might have pieces that move from year to year, and we got to be ready for that. So the next step is then the principals figure out what we need, and as I said, for staffing, it's a bigger group conversation as well. And then that's when positions get posted on our website, which leads to experience for candidates, which is their ability to get on there and see those and type in, or I should say, click on and then type in a lot of things for the written application. Then that also, to be submitted, also requires a video interview. So we have a video interview that, besides uploading their resume and other documents like reference letters and all the demographic stuff you normally would do, experience, they also do a brief video interview. So it's usually about 4 questions. They have about 2 minutes to respond to those. And then those are used as sort of our first screening tool for our hiring, so that even before they look at the written applications, we always encourage our hiring managers, our department chairs in particular, and the assistant principals who work with them to look at those video interviews to make sure that we are, not just looking at people on paper, and that we are looking at people in person as well. It's nice because it kind of counts then. We can say everybody who applies to District 99 at least gets an interview of some kind. So we have that to look at. I'm sorry. Oh, hey, you got over there.
I got you.
Thank you, Hank, thank you. So then next we have the interviewing itself. So I talked a little bit about this. Primarily when, most of the hiring we're talking about is certified staff or teaching staff. And so the first people involved that are department chairs and then the designated administrator. So designated administrator, as I mentioned, is another administrator, one of our assistant principals, could be our principal. One of our building level directors who work with the department chair and partner with them in this hiring process. So as I mentioned, candidates will submit their application with the video interview, all their materials, and then the designated administrator and department chair review those applicants. So they're looking at those videos and they're saying, wow, here's some candidates that really stood out in those videos. Now let's look at their applications and make sure things like, do they have the background that is ideal for what we're looking at, after that sort of coordination piece I first mentioned, and try to find out who are the slate of candidates that are going to be our best group of people to bring in for an in-person interview. And then that can vary in terms of numbers depending on how many qualified candidates we have. Then what happens is the department chair and designated administrator, they also put together an interview advisory team. And so that is the folks I've already mentioned, then that will also include teachers from the building as well, from the department that is the positions posted in, to allow them to have a voice in the process, to meet the candidates, to give perspective, because obviously we've heard about a lot about our goals today and collaboration, how it's important, and teamwork and things like that. So we also want to get a sense and feedback from our current staff on any new staff that are coming in. So we want them to be part of that process. The interview advisory team also has some things that go along with that. There's, again, a kind of a link to the larger document as a separate document just for this team, where they are coached up and reminded about good hiring practices, in particular things like being aware of biases in interviews. And so there's like kind of, definitions of what types of biases are, what they are, how to avoid them. We have a few videos that people around these advisory teams view to remind them about being cognizant when you're sitting in an interview about saying, oh, the first person was great, and then letting them be the standard you judge everyone else by, but, trying to put those things out of your mind as much as you can and being fair and taking each candidate at their worth as they come in, and being specific about the, things that are positives for them and what are the things that we might need to do to support them if we were to add them to our team. And as an ongoing goal, in our district is to try and increase the diversity of our staff to more better reflect the growing diversity of our students. And so if there are qualified candidates, so they have their certification, they have, particular, sometimes specific certifications in the areas we're looking at. Like I said, if we're looking for somebody who's a physics-based teacher, we need somebody who has a physics background. We want to make sure that we bring those candidates in and give them the opportunity to come in and interview with us so that we are, again, purposely trying to avoid some of those biases that might exist. So after that process, then, we get to our finalists, not the finalists, but sort of the final group, narrow it down. Usually it gets narrowed down to 2 or 3 candidates, and that will involve a couple of things. It's going to involve a performance assessment, and so the department chair and the designated administrator will work together to determine what that's going to be, and it can be a plethora of things. There's an opportunity to go observe that teacher teach in their classroom or review some materials that they have in terms of lesson planning they've done. Maybe there's some other, a question and scenario types of things. So again, that varies in a lot of ways. The document that is more detailed has some samples and examples of the things that can be used for those performance assessments. But again, the idea there is to try and tease out as much as you can in a practical sense what this person can bring to the table as a candidate for us. And again, as I said, those are varied and customizable because depending on the need in the department and the position, we might want somebody to do a different type of performance assessment to try and fill where we feel like we have a need based on that opening or somewhere we want to get stronger and get better. At that time, then also the department chair will start their reference checks. So they're making those phone calls, sending out those forms to make sure that we are getting some check on the references. That always includes a phone call to a direct supervisor, which is sometimes some people list that person in the references, sometimes they don't. But that's something that we always seek to do because we want to have that perspective of the potential employee. And then there's a second admin interview, which usually involves the building principal, obviously, and also then Gina comes into play at this point as well as our leader in the curriculum side of things to make sure that person meets the muster in terms of what we're doing curricularly for our students. So she'll meet usually 2 candidates out of that group and then kind of be part of that process as well. So again, once that happens and Gina's had a chance then to meet with those candidates, all the data is reviewed. So we're reviewing the video interview, reviewing the notes from the first in-person interview, we're reviewing the application, the references, all these things, and taking the notes, feedback from those people who were involved on that interview advisory committee, and then the designated administrator department chair are reviewing all of that, and then they talk to the principal and say, here's the finalists, here's who we would like to recommend to hire. Principal then double checks with Gina to verify, hey, any red flags about hiring Jury? Does she seem like she's good? And Gina says, thumbs up, we're good with Jury. And then the department chair has the clearance to then reach out to our candidate and make sort of that initial offer saying, you are a finalist, you're who we would like to go with, pending board approval and your, discussion with HR about everything else. So once they do that, they send over information to me so I know who the candidate is. And then my role in that process at that point then is to review all the information. I double check on their certifications, their endorsements. Do they have what they need to legally teach? I do my due diligence to make sure there isn't any other things we need to worry about. I review the information that comes back from the background check they also do, which is the fingerprinting criminal background check, to make sure that they are also fine there. And then I will contact the candidate and I discuss, whether we're looking to place them on our salary schedule based on their experience as well as their educational background, which is how our salary schedule works. And then if they are amenable to that, then we send out our contract to them, which then is what will come to the board then for approval.
And that's what shows up in the personnel report, like what you'll see this evening. So one of the things that came up in the last week, or last month, was that we had an administrator come on board prior to being approved by the board. And over the last several years, working with a variety of boards, we've approached this in different ways. But many times we need to announce internally, sometimes externally, that somebody is starting with us prior to the board approving that person being employed with us. And this is where the board superintendent relationship gets a little weird, as we discussed in our Starting Right workshop, and the fact that the board hires one employee, technically, me, and then the superintendent's responsible for hiring all of the other employees. However, there is an oversight of the superintendent hiring all of the other employees by coming to the board for board approval. So there's almost always this window of time in between where administratively, we've worked through this whole process that Jeff has outlined. We've made an offer to somebody, they've accepted that offer. Administratively, we've signed off on that process, yet the board has not yet approved that person. Sometimes it's while the school year is running, right? Like a teacher has to leave for some reason, we hire somebody to come in. We need that teacher in front of our kids right away. We're administratively approving this person, but it might be weeks before it comes to the board for approval. So we're still communicating to that teacher's students and their families that, Mrs. Smith has come in to replace, Mr. Jones, and, pending board approval, they will be the full-time teacher in this position. Boards in the past have and board presidents in the past have encouraged us to lead with that statement that this person is coming on board pending board approval, to make it clear that the board has a role in the approval process. However, the board's role in the approval process is very restricted by law, right? There would have to be a glaring problem in that recommendation to the board for the board to not approve that and have it move forward, right? So we don't want to give the impression that it's a rubber stamp by the board, right? That the board has no involvement, but the board has limited involvement in a hiring of anything other than a superintendent, right? So I guess at this point, I kind of like this board's take. There's kind of we talked with the board's attorneys on kind of how different districts do this. Some districts take the tack that we do. We kind of open with it. Travis McGuire will be hired by District 99 pending board approval. That's kind of the opening line of our announcements, right? Other districts talk about hiring Travis, bringing him in, everything else, and then at the end of the announcement, and Dr. McGuire's contract will be on the next board agenda for approval, right? And indicate a softer direction that the board has authority over it. Either way it shows up, it's just how would this board like for us to indicate that when we make those announcements? And it's not for every hiring we do, but like a head coach or, a very public teacher, like a band director or an administrator or principal. Those are the types of positions where there's usually some kind of an announcement that goes along with that could be going out in that in-between time.
I can summarize the concern that was raised by Kara, who is not here tonight. So her point of bringing this up was, as a board, as Hank suggested, we have limited roles in approving the hiring of personnel, right? As Hank suggested, unless there's some exigent circumstance that would present itself, we're pretty much approving those hires. So to say that we're hiring somebody subject to board approval sort of gives off an impression that we're sort of going to be evaluating the hiring and determining whether or not that person should be hired as a board. And I think that's probably not a true and accurate representation of the process. But Hank explained to me that the former board, under Dr. Kupka's leadership, wanted that language in there because they wanted the public to understand that it's not simply a rubber stamp. It's ironic because Kara was arguing that it is kind of a rubber stamp. So I think Hank is just looking for direction from us as to what language to utilize as we go forward. Do we want that language that it's subject to board approval?
Mm-hmm.
Or the alternative is to...
Yeah, the other thing would, like, we have led with it in the past to indicate that the board has a process, as a part of the hiring process, which you do. You are asked to approve everything, and nobody's, when Jeff makes the offer, it's always pending board approval, right? Like, if it wasn't approved at a board meeting, that person would be terminated immediately, right? The other option is being kind of just less leading and front forward with that, and just including that the process ends with board approval. Like, the recommendation, for you put it kind of lower in the announcement towards the end, where you say, you know, Mr. Espinoza will come to the board for contractual approval, you know, at whatever date.
What was Karen's position on it? What was did she give a recommendation on what she liked to see?
She was just questioning whether or not that language was necessary, because we're not really, integrally involved in making individual decisions on hiring processes.
But it has to come through us because
Yes,
it's
it
a
does.
financial,
It does.
Transaction, yeah.
financial commitment.
Correct.
My perspective after hearing all of this is, as long as it's not interfering or interrupting your process, Jeff, by making that representation that it's subject to the approval of the board, then I think we should just continue on that path. Because what if there is a circumstance that there is something that was missed, and the board
happens.
has an opportunity to say.
Not here, doesn't happen.
Yeah, but
Not here, but
I do
in other
everything I can
places
to
it
avoid that.
happens.
I think we'd be remiss if we change the policy tonight, and then something did happen, and we'd have to sort of then take action potentially to terminate that employee, even though we never really approved them in the first place. So I'm of the mindset that we just maintain the process that was directed from the prior board.
Yeah, I agree.
I would agree.
I agree.
Okay. That makes it easy. We have a template that we generally use that indicates
keep it-
that the
keep
final
it going.
process is board approval.
Keep it going.
I have a question about the hiring process. You mentioned that the video, is that video for everyone who wants a role here at, okay. and
Yeah, we do it, we use the video interviewing for every position we post.
How is that going for us? Because that's an extensive process for those who probably aren't educators, or who may be looking for a role that may be in a lower salary band. I mean, because that's a extensive process based on where, and I don't know, well, yeah, there's still, people are still looking for employees, so how do we compete if we need an employee who is not gonna be an educator, but we need someone in our facilities or something like that? That's a lot of steps for the role, and we have to compete with other roles that may be in that pay band, where they don't have to do as much. So I know I questioned that in the past about that's a lot to ask in a competitive employee environment. I think there should be, based on the role, we look at the steps that the person would have to take based on the role. Because having someone get on a video that may be looking for a role in our facilities or a lunchroom or something like that, that may not even have access to video and all that stuff, I think, I have said before, I think it's a lot based on what the level of the position may be.
Well, I don't think, so the first question is impacting us, something to that effect, and I don't think that it is. We do occasionally get people who have questions about the process, and we're able to answer those. I know for some of our hiring managers who do hire in facilities or some of the other areas beyond our certified staff, they actually appreciate the video interviews because it allows them sometimes the opportunity to streamline their hiring process a little bit, because they sort of get that first interview screening is done on the computer. I would say when we look at, I don't have a hard percentage number, but when I look at the number of applicants we have just in any position versus the number of people who reach out with problems, it's pretty minimal. And half the time, it's, they need to update their phone, because a lot of people are doing these on their phone or on an iPad or something, and it seems to be working out well. I know and there's a decent number of other districts who also do use the hiring videos as well. There's a few different services out there, but they're all pretty similar in terms of candidate experience.
Okay, I'm just curious of what the other board members think. I actually think it's a stressful process. And it depends on what role you're looking for. I've talked to some community members and kind of talked about, they're like, you have any roles, check it out. And then I hear, oh my God, I just, just the idea of going through all that, or they may not have completed it for those reasons. I think it's a great idea, but I just think in a competitive employee market, is that a competitive approach depending on the role? That's all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the area that we maybe have the biggest need right now is with substitute teachers and paraprofessionals in the district. Those are the positions we have most difficulty filling, and in order to address just the need in general, and also maybe taking in consideration what you mentioned, that maybe some people may not be comfortable. That's why we did the hiring career fair in June, and we're going to be looking to do another one in August, where we are here we did it South last time, probably we'll be doing it again. I think it was about 4 hours of time where myself and the rest of my staff were there. Scott was there to help out a little bit at our last one, and we had Chromebooks. We brought in some of our current staff members who are paraprofessionals and substitute teachers, and all those people were there to meet these people, to answer questions. We had Chromebooks available, so we told them, hey, here's what this application process involves. If you'd like to do that here's Chromebooks, so if you have any questions, people are here to help and assist you. So, yeah, we're always like, we understand that there might be some people from time to time who that's a bit, maybe intimidating, or they have a technology glitch or something. And so I think we really do our best to go out our way to try and help support people to get those applications in.
Yeah, because the technology in itself could be the hindrance. Like, I am not technically savvy, so I could be the best candidate, but now I can't even go for the role.
Do the
and
interview.
That's not a prerequisite for, depending on what the role is. So I just think about all that stuff, especially in the era where we have, you have to have, you go to the grocery store, you need to put in a code just to get the sale. So just being conscious of that in our, today in the climate of people who can be looking for employees, it's even from an age perspective, right? That may not be, that could be a hindrance from that perspective. The other question I wanted to ask about the diversity piece. So we talk about there is a video, so we're already exposing, I know, the diversity if there is a video. And I remember Pete talked about at one point, we had it where you did not, we were doing, maybe extracting the name or doing something to kind of ensure that there is no unconscious bias in the process, in the interview process. But a video actually, that kind of.
Well, and that's part of the reason for the video interview again as well, is that, you're not looking at names on a paper, you're looking at the video, which you don't know what somebody's background is based just on their name necessarily. So we want to encourage our staff to look at those videos so they are bringing in diverse candidates, make sure they're getting every fair advantage to be reviewed and considered for our positions.
The video interview serves as the first face-to-face interview for every candidate, right? So everybody who takes the time to complete, which is, each video is 30 seconds.
Yeah, its average time to complete is maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah. So every single person that goes through the effort to apply and to complete the video interview is going to be viewed. They're going to get a first-round interview.
Okay.
Where in other places where people are screening using paper, there could be implicit bias based on where they went to school or where they worked before this or what they look like or any of those things that could be there, that we work with our implicit bias training to make sure that those aren't there. But more so, we get to hear their words, not what we interpret of their words on a page, right? So it'd be the same as if anybody who wanted a job here came in, sat down in front of us, answered 4 screening questions face-to-face, and we had the opportunity to review that with everybody who wanted a job here. So yes, it can be a barrier, maybe, for some people, but we believe it opens more doors for candidates, then it closes. And we haven't had issues with custodian staff or support staff or I mean, very few individuals that have a tech issue, and most of the time it's, they want to re-record something, like they made a mistake as they were recording.
Yeah,
and we
something
just need to
happened,
reset.
yeah, or a lot, you know, they're doing home and the dog knocked over their computer, so they want to reset. We can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we can't measure how many people don't do it because they don't have technology. We can only, you know what I mean?
I've only had one person reach out to me in the 8 years that we've been doing it,
Okay.
that was concerned that they needed to complete a video interview.
But, because we can't ask in the application process, you know, what race or ethnicity someone is, the video interview allows us to fulfill our policy, which is to bring in a diverse candidate and provide them with an interview. That would be the only way, unless we're going to interview every single candidate.
Well, so, and that's kind of the proactive advantage to it. So somebody's name is Bob Smith. I mean, they could be biracial, they could be any one of different backgrounds. And so this gives a chance to look at that person, say, okay, here's somebody I wouldn't have expected was a diverse candidate just looking at them on paper, but they are, and I'm going to be bringing them in. Or, you know, hopefully we don't have this because we're cognizant about this, but there's also, you know, there's research out there that'll say that if you have a more ethnic sounding name from a less Anglo sounding name, you might be less likely to have your application looked at, where we purposely are saying, no, you must look at these videos, you must make sure you're giving these candidates fair appraisal and fair review, just like you would with anybody else if you're looking just on paper. I think that helps, hopefully is leveling the playing field in that regard, just to make it where we are, you know, like you said, meeting our goal to try and, you know, have our staff more accurately reflect our students, which is always going to be an ongoing goal.
If we got rid of the video interviews, we might miss out on some potential diverse candidates that we don't otherwise bring in, is the point.
Okay, I can think through that one. I think I'm equally as concerned about just video too for certain roles, that's all, but.
Okay.
All right. Then once they're, somewhere in here, there's an onboarding process depending on the timeline and everything else. That could be before the announcement, before board approval, or it could be after. But generally, Jeff, what do we do with onboarding to get somebody started up with us?
Absolutely. So onboarding, I think that, you know, I view it as starting with, and I make that call to the candidate to make an offer to them. And then for all of our candidates, regardless of what type of position they're interviewing for, then the next step is pretty similar. I review with them, here's, you know, what you're going to need to consider, insurance options, you know, some of the disclosures, things we need, you know, being a school district, DCFS, et cetera. And then they are reached out to by my office, and usually it's Chris Blum, who's our ad assistant in the office. You'll meet with them when they have their paperwork ready and sits down with them, make sure that they have all their ducks in a row and T's crossed, I's dotted, all that paperwork's done. It's another chance for him to reinforce some of the things I've discussed with them on the phone, another chance for those candidates to ask questions while they're coming on board. And so that's that paperwork side of things. And then again, specific to our certified staff, obviously the bulk of those come in at the start of the school year. And so then they have the new teacher orientation program, which is in August, which is an annual thing run by the associate principals for instruction at each building. So I always make sure they know about that. But then that gets them started with on the right foot with everything they need to know about D99 to be successful right off the bat. Gets them a chance to get, you know, meet their mentor teacher, hopefully, so they have that piece going on with our mentorship program moving on. So that onboarding process starts with my phone call and continues on into the future of their employment with us, at least a couple of years formally, but then informally, you know, hopefully they're building relationships that allow them to be successful in the long term as well.
All right, so, any questions?
Overall, Jeff, do you see District 99 still being competitive in the marketplace in attracting the highest and best candidates?
I do, and it's, you know, it's a great question because I'm reminded about when we had several job fairs I went to in the spring, and you know, one of them was with a group of high school districts that I, you know, collaborate with the other people in my similar positions at those districts, and we kind of as a group put on a job fair, and you know, it was for, you know, let's say it was 10 to 2 o'clock. and I was there for another half hour because there were still people lined up who just wanted to say hello, get their resumes in to District 99 because of our reputation. And when I go to like ISU, which is one of I think the 5th largest producer of teachers in the country, there's always lines of people who want to come in and introduce themselves to me because they are familiar with District 99 and our reputation. So, as you hear about the teacher shortages, and while that, is real for us in the sense that some pools for those harder to find positions, I should say, get a little shallower because there's fewer candidates, we still have been very fortunate because of our reputation and the great things that we're doing now to still attract a good pool of candidates and be a place where people, I refer to as a destination district.
And how would you characterize our compensation packages? I mean, is it competitive?
I would say our compensation package is competitive. We do get candidates sometimes with several years' experience coming from other districts because, A, they want to come to District 99 because of the great reputation and the things that we're able to do for students here, and B, oftentimes they're going to see a little bump in their paycheck versus what they would get where they stay. So that's one of the reasons why I think that the teacher shortage hasn't hit us as hard, is because we are not only competing or attracting, I should say, the new teachers coming out of college, but we're also able to recruit from existing staff in other districts.
How often have you found that where we've identified a candidate, we've selected that candidate, and then you have a conversation with them about salary and benefits, and then they reject the position? Has that happened in your experience?
That has happened, yeah. It's happened. I'm going to my 4th year in this role, so it's happened a handful of times. I would say once or twice a year. That really is a sticking point. But
what happens in that regard? I mean, is there talk amongst the administrative team about potentially countering and increasing the offer, or is it, this is our package, this is our pay grade, and that's it, and if you don't like it?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's more the latter. What I will do if it comes up, I'll go back and usually it's Gina I talk to and say, hey, am I missing anything here? That we should give or with Rob as well, just to make sure that when I've reviewed all of the information I have, do I have everything I need to have given them the correct offer? Because that offer is going to be based on their years of experience, and then it's also going to be based on their education that is applicable to our district. So where we do have run into the problem a couple times is where districts will do their own PD in-house, and then they'll sometimes give teachers credit for that. But the way our contract is written, that doesn't transfer over here necessarily, because we have, with a few specific exceptions, you have to be taking coursework in an advanced degree program that is coursework that's part of an advanced degree program. So you have to be taking courses that are part of a master's or doctoral program and not in-house sort of like PD stuff that other districts let you pile up those credits. I mean, we have some opportunities like that here in District 99, but not as many as other districts do. So that will kind of inflate, and some places will do that, I think, as a way to help keep their people, because then they're going to price them out of moving somewhere like District 99.
How successful was the job fair you had earlier?
So that was for paras and substitute teachers, or guest teachers, as we like to call them. And I was very happy with the results. If you had asked me before it started, I said, boy, if we get 20 people through the door, that's going to be a good day. We had over 40 people show up. So that was amazing, yeah. So I've processed reviewing video interviews and looking at applications I usually do that for our subs, and then I hand those off to Chris, and he reaches out to them to get their paperwork going. So we're probably somewhere close to a dozen new subs added specifically from that fair. And in terms of paras, like right before and right after, we had 2 or 3 paras that we hired right around that time, but then since then, there are, I think, 8 or 9 people currently going through the interview process in our district, where they're just waiting for their second interviews, and those may have happened. So I'm hoping before the end of the week, I've got some paperwork to add to our paras. So if those all work out pretty well, we'll be close to half of the needs that we had filled in terms of the paraprofessionals. Job coaches was another one where we've had difficulty. There's only a handful of those positions, but I think again there's a couple of people on the docket that we're very close to filling those positions. So that's very exciting. And then, as I mentioned, given the success of the fair in June, that's why I'm going to plan to do another one here in August, and hopefully if we have even, I'm thinking, now we're getting close to the start of the school year, people are back, they're done with vacations, maybe they're thinking, hey, I do want to do this, or you may have some teachers who haven't yet landed somewhere and they're looking for some way to get their foot in the door. It's a great opportunity, again, to promote it in August here and get them in the door. So, yeah, it was very successful, so that's why, yeah, we're looking to do it again, and if we have similar success, we'll be very close to having our needs met.
Great, great.
All right. I hope that this, provides you the overview. I didn't think it was fair to have the conversation about how we announce things without the board having the background on how we actually do things. And I will provide you that more detailed document as well. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, a couple of quick ones that have already come to the board. Changes to the student parent handbook. This has been sent to the board multiple times in advance of today. Really, Scott has worked with the folks that head up discipline in the buildings, the administrators that are responsible for that. Really, the only change that we're bringing to the board in the student handbook for this year is related to personal electronic devices. Really changing the default that the devices are are silenced and are not being used in instructional settings unless the teacher gives, or the staff member in that space gives explicit permission to do so. Along with that then is the changes in the discipline section of the student handbook for students that don't follow those expectations. So any questions around this for me or Scott?
One thing in there, you say cell phones. What about iPads?
Yeah, it's any kind of personal electronic device.
But do you think iPads needs to be
It's a
spelled
personal
out?
electronic device.
Do you think it needs to be spelled out?
I don't, but I'm happy to add it if the board feels like, we tend not to name brands.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
an
that's
I, like, 'cause,
Yeah, that's true. I
it's
got
a
you.
tablet. Like, I could include
Or a
tablet, but,
Tablet,
you
yeah.
know, but really, the device that's causing us the most angst right now are mobile phones.
Okay.
But really, anything that they're bringing in that's an electronic device, whether it's a phone, a Game Boy, and like they're going to the Wayback Machine. You know, I'm reaching way back there. They found something in an old box in their basement. Any of that, anything that is a personal electronic device would qualify under this clause in the handbook.
How is this assuming that the board takes action and approves this tonight, how will this be communicated to students?
So it will, the first step is updating the actual handbook. And then it will be communicated as students return at the start of the year within both buildings by the administration in our student expectation work. So it'll be presented as a whole, but then we're also going to work with our teaching staff. We have kind of a template for the teacher syllabi that will make sure that there's a prompt in that for teachers to include that in their syllabus and discuss that in their individual classroom settings as well. And then I'm sure Courtney and Arwen will have it in all of their parent things that go out as well, so that families can help us and reinforce this as well.
So how much teacher input was made in the final draft that we have?
It was sent out to the entire staff, and anybody could have offered feedback. I met specifically with the DGA leadership, and they provided their feedback in a document. Much of it we accepted in this, not all of it, but we took a great deal of feedback between, there was like 3 versions along the way that led into this final version.
So we're confident that if we put this out there, that we'll have 100% buy-in from our teachers?
No, I don't believe in anything that we put out there will have 100% buy-in in anything. But this is what was asked for, in a way that it was asked for, that the default be that the devices are not being used, rather than every individual teacher needing to communicate their expectations for that space. So that was really the key, was, and every teacher is going to have a spectrum of what they're more comfortable with in their space. There are some teachers that are using cell phones every day to poll their students and to gather feedback and those kinds of things. And there are some teachers that would prefer that they didn't exist, right? And we're going to have that full range of use inside of a classroom. Ultimately, a teacher needs to be able to communicate what their expectations are and then enforce that. But it was clear in our meeting with the DGA and the feedback that we got through the hybrid block schedule that our staff would prefer that the default is that the device is not making noise and that a student is not interacting with it by default. Now, how a teacher manages that in their space is going to be very different depending on the teacher, the physical layout of the space, the students that they have there, and the instructional goals of that individual class or the course as a whole.
Okay.
If I take my Board of Education member hat off and I just wear my parent hat, I'm extremely elated with this policy. And I think, I think a lot of parents in the community have been looking for a policy like this. And I know that this was brought to fruition by teacher concern, and I applaud Hank for addressing this in a creative manner through the handbook. I think that's the proper way to address this, and I think this is a positive step in the right direction to give teachers more control back in their classroom without having to be deemed the unpopular teacher who doesn't have a popular policy within their classroom. So hopefully this will be well received by our teachers, and I'm pretty darn sure that it's going to be well received by our parents.
And just a reminder, the reason we're putting it in the handbook is it allows us administratively to be more nimble. So if we find like we didn't go far enough with this and we're not seeing behaviors change or improve, the way with the approval of the student handbook allows the administration to make changes and then come back later to have the board approve them. So if we need to make a change in real time, we can. Where if this sat in board policy, remember that process is very board driven, right? So it would have to go
Like 3 months.
through like, yeah, it'd be like a 2-month period to make a change. If come like October, we feel like, wow, this is not enough, or this didn't go far, or we didn't consider this setting or whatever, that we can make the adaptation in real time and then come back to the board to get it approved under further discussion. But allows us to be a lot more responsive and proactive when it sits in the student handbook rather than in board policy.
Yeah.
From a
Totally
discipline
agree.
standpoint, can you just walk us through, so I'm John Smith in Miss Spar Thomas's classroom, and I look at my phone for the first time. Walk us through what the discipline process looks like.
So that's spelled out here, right behind Scott's head. So obviously we
It's on
want
you.
to reinforce with the student the expectations, explain to them what's there. So I'd assume, and whenever we talk about discipline, there's 2 terms we always talk about, frequency and severity, right? So it is very situational dependent, right? So you would expect that the teacher would follow up with that student, that individual student, either in the moment or, pull them aside during class or after class and reinforce the expectations in their classroom. Now, what the student does next determines on how you progress there. Like if the student is like, F you, I can do whatever I want, well, we're not even talking about cell phones anymore. Like, we're talking about insubordination and behavior. Cell phone is not the issue right now, right? So we would expect that a student would be like, thanks for reminding me, or I got it, or, whatever, oops, like something like that, and that their behavior would change, right? Now, if it doesn't happen again for months and months at a time, it kind of like resets. If 5 minutes later the student has their device out, okay, like they have escalated that because of frequency, not necessarily severity, right? Once it reaches that point where the intervention that the teacher is providing in the classroom is not working or being effective, our expectation is the next step is involving the family. Allowing the parents the opportunity to know it's becoming a distraction, that I've talked to your child, things are not improving, this is what we saw in the classroom, can you please help us get this back, so that your child is productive in the classroom. We're hoping that that resolves it and then that all resets, right? If that doesn't work, then it starts moving through the discipline process in the building where it gets a referral to the dean's office. The dean's office, somebody in the dean's office, a dean is going to meet with that student, try to figure out why it is that this isn't getting resolved, take a look at what's happening. Is this happening in multiple classrooms or just in this classroom? To see if there's a larger concern that's just being demonstrated through the misbehavior through a cell phone. At that point, maybe the counseling department needs to get involved. There's all these different pathways that could follow. If the behaviors don't change, then we're going to move into more of our progressive discipline pieces, which are laid out on this second page here, right? Which is where you're going to move into things like detentions, involvement in the PATH program. If, any of these things, if they continue to go on and on and on, the outcomes escalate. And that's what's kind of laid out here.
Thanks for doing that.
Yep. So any other questions on this one? All right, so that's the approval that's in there tonight. When the board approves that, that's the change. Athletic Activities Handbook, this has been provided to the board. No changes from last year being recommended at this point. We just ask the board to reapprove it because then it does, both the student handbook and the Activities Athletic Handbook have more authority after the board has approved them. Freedom of information requests, we've received them and have responded to them. They're available on our website if you search FOIAs. And that's it for me.
Uh-oh,
Thank you, Dr. Thiele.
the battery is low.
Oh.
Oh,
Moving to the consent agenda, before we vote on approving the consent agenda, is there any agenda item a board member would like to pull out of the consent agenda for further discussion? Hearing none, then can I get a motion for the Board of Education to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes the personnel report, appointment certified, appointment administration, transfer of position classified, appointment classified. B, personnel report, retirement administration, resignation certified, retirement classified, non-renewal classified. C, May treasurer report and June and July expenditures. D, closed session minutes and verbatim recordings. E, settlement agreement and general release in regards to IELRB case number 2023 CA0042C. F, athletic trainer contract. G, authorized signers for Wintrust master lease agreement. H, SACID Board of Directors alternate representative appointment resolution. And I, acceptance of donation EMD paint and design.
So moved.
Second.
Terry moved, Chris seconds.
Thank you very much. Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Chris Espinoza,
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller,
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom,
Aye.
Ken Dawson,
Aye.
and Don Renner.
Aye.
Oh, Don, I'd just like to say thanks to
Yeah, I
the,
was gonna
oh,
do the
were
same.
you
No,
going to do
go
that?
ahead. No, please go ahead.
Just say thanks to EMD Paint and Design for painting the scoreboard at North. That was very kind of them to donate that to the district, and we just want to say thank you.
and that's in cooperation with the athletic boosters at North that have been really working hard to get that done.
Yes, yes. So every little bit counts, and
Absolutely.
that
Yep.
counts a lot.
Appreciate it all.
Thank you, thank you.
After the consent agenda, item 7, recommendations for action. Can I get a motion from the Board of Education to approve the proposed changes to the student parent handbook, including discipline code, and the reapproval of the athletic activities handbook?
So moved.
Second.
Chris moved and Jenny second.
Chris Espinoza,
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Ken Dawson,
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller,
Aye.
and Don Renner.
Aye, motion carries.
Reception of visitors, we have no slips. Is there
Correct.
anybody that wished to address the board? All right.
Item 11, communications and announcements. Jenny, anything to report from Lend?
No.
No, okay.
We're not, yeah. We're starting to form our committees for work next year, but it's kind of the summer hiatus right now.
Yeah, the executive council was supposed to meet tomorrow morning, but that was canceled and has not been rescheduled, so. Hank, any reports from SACID?
We have 2 interim directors there to replace the past director who took another job opportunity. We're kind of transitioning into this new structure, so starting in August, I will start attending monthly meetings during the day. And then Sherelle has 3 meetings that she will attend as the governing board throughout the year. She and I will both be there together. But really just they're trying to get the new folks up and going and get the school year started just like we are. We are hosting at North High their opening day with their staff. So they're going to come over and use North High to get their team up and going this year. So we're helping out in that way. But I'm sure you'll hear a lot about SACID over the next year as we have to hire several key positions there for the long term.
Terry, any report from the Education Foundation?
Yeah, just real quick, our meeting is Wednesday, so this is just the last month. Our meeting has changed to South High in one of the meeting rooms, so we will be meeting there, I think, from now on, and unless something comes up and there's a conflict or whatever. And we joined the National Association of the Education Foundations, and we're very excited about what they have to offer for us. They've got webinars and different things that we can participate in. And Kara has joined us as one of our members representing the board. And so like I said, we're still looking for more members, so if anybody knows anyone that would want to be on our board, by all means, send them to Julia Beckman, and that would be on our website. So, other than that.
Thanks, Terry. And then Ken, from the Illinois Association of School Boards?
Nothing new, just a reminder, we have the 90th annual conference coming up in November, the 17th through the 19th. There'll be a lot of great sessions, workshops, be opportunity to network with board members from around the state and find out about best practices. So really looking forward to that.
Just by show of hands, are we all planning on attending? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good.
And I will bake cookies this
Then I'll definitely be there.
Write that down.
All right, upcoming board meetings, we have an upcoming workshop on August 7th at 6:30, and then a regular business meeting on August 21st, both of which will be at 6:30 PM here at the ASC. And then finally, we are going to be making a motion to go into closed session for audience members. We will not be coming back out into open session to take any action thereafter,
Except to adjourn.
except to adjourn. So I need a motion from the Board of Education for the, to go into closed session for the purposes of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the district or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity in accordance with 5 ILCS 120/2C1.
So moved.
Sherelle moved, and second?
Second.
Ken, second.
Thank you very much. Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Ken Dawson.
Aye.
Chris Espinoza.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Trey Pavasich.
Aye.
And Don Renner.
Aye, motion carries. We're moving into closed session. Thank you very much.